Are you guys excited? I'm so happy to meet y'all. This is fun.
It's going to be so good.
Yes.
Yes.
Y'all, go ahead and introduce yourself. Raelyn, if you want to go first, tell me full name, what school, and if you want to throw in your age, just because we're students here, right? And then we'll just roll with that.
Okay. So I am Raelyn Bagley. I go to Trident Tech, and I'm 19 years old.
I am Keaira Rivers. I go to Trident Tech, and I am 23 years old.
And you're both in the Human Services program, right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So tell me how you got there, because I know one of you started with the idea of doing service for people, and then one of you had plan on doing that.
Yeah.
Keaira, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. So, my road to get here, I started in university, so a 4-year school in psychology, and it was fun. And I was getting close to the end, and then it went I had financial issues with the school, but so I continued school. I didn't want to give up because I came so far. So I did human services, and that's how I started. And it's more in depth. It's what I wanted the psychology degree to be, if that makes sense.
I was more on I didn't know what I was wanting to pursue. So I started kind of just wanting to figure out what I wanted to do. So when I saw human services, it kind of aligned with my passions and some of the things that I want to pursue, like teaching and counseling and things like that. So I thought that starting off with human services would probably be my best bet to kind of look at the different options that I have.
So let's roll back for a second. What kind of school y'all attend? Is it like a large public university? Is it small?
It's a tech school.
Yes, tech. So it's kind of, it may be bigger than we think it is, but to us it's small because we don't really go on campus or anything. Well, not me, at least.
I went on campus for one class in my spring term, and it's not as big as universities.
So y'all have been fully immersed in this online learning environment, right?
Yes.
What is that for y'all?
I love it. I love it.
I was very weary at first, just because my senior year of high school, I was kind of forced to transition from the in-person lectures to online. So it was that's part of the reason why I was kind of not sure what I wanted to pursue yet. So I kind of just was like, okay, I got to learn this is the new way. I got to learn how to acclimate to this. So let me just try this. At first it was a little difficult.
So Raelyn, you were saying that transitioning from high school to college, that from in-person to online, that kind of impacted deciding what you wanted to do coming into school?
Yes, I was really, honestly, not really wanting to come to school. I was very drained and just kind of felt burnout because that transition was just so, it was not what I was expecting. I thought it was going to be online, it'll be kind of easier and I'll be more motivated to do my classes, but it was kind of the complete opposite of that. So when I graduated, I was more focused on kind of taking some time off and kind of refiguring out my priorities and my goals for myself before I started school.
I love that for you because we're not that different in age, but I got about 10 years ahead of y'all, so a whole decade. And I remember the thought in high school was you go to college. There was never any talk. The assumption was everyone's being prepped to go to university. Everybody. I, by all means, love school, but I really, really struggled watching my friends that went and didn't finish. Not because I wanted them to finish. I mean, they just didn't want to do it in the first place. And what a waste of time, So I admire that you had the mindset to want to kind of step back and take that time to assess what you wanted to do, because that was not instilled in us at all. Yeah, you're shaking your head. Did you have the same experience, or were you kind of just ready to jump into university?
I wish I could have explored other options better. But the school I went to, they were like, oh, you have to go to college. You have to do this. You need these credits, take these classes. And it was like college, 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 college. Like we even had like 3 different college days where all the seniors like announced what college they were going to. And it was like, well, what about everything else?
That is so stressful.
Yeah.
That's
And
kind of
we would have to go up on stage, and like if like a group of people were going to the same university, we would all go on stage and then say what major we're going to do. And then we had this little sign that we held up, and the school took pictures of all of it. It was crazy. It was crazy.
that's like either when you go to a kid room, they always have you hold those signs up like I love you. Like, that's so much pressure. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Okay, so obviously the pressure is not that much. My goodness. Okay, so y'all had similar entry experiences as I did. Granted, I definitely was in that mind trap of like, oh yeah, I got to go to university. What was that first year like? And we are going to transition into what brought you to human services, but I want y'all to be able to kind of relate to other student viewers. I'm biased. That's my favorite population. Like, y'all rock, and it's very hard in the positions that you find yourself in. So, from you transitioned into university, what did you kind of find out about yourself and your own personal interest in that first year?
My first year, like I said, I was in a big 4-year school. So I was like, why am I here? Like, I thought it would be so much more of a challenge when I first got in there. And then they were giving me work that I would do in high school. So I was like, am I in high school again? Like, why am I doing this again? Like, I thought I was supposed to focus on something else, but it's like, oh, you have to take this social studies class and this math class and this science class. And I'm just like, I was contemplating a lot, like if I even wanted to stay, because it was like, I'm doing the same thing I've been doing for how long? It's like, is this ever going to end?
Yes, that was word for word. That was me too. I went in thinking one thing. Obviously, like I changed my mind, but my whole motivation shifted from doing what I was told to be successful, realizing that was not my field, and then kind of looking around like John Travolta in Pulp Fiction. Like, why am I doing stuff I did in high school? I'm being baby fed, right? Or spoon fed. And so that ended up leading me to my, the integrated studies degree where at that time it wasn't taken very seriously, but I got to pick from different disciplines. But my whole motivation was the same. I'm like, I'm not paying to go here for you to tell me what I need to know. I mean, that's not how they painted the college experience, right? So it's very nice to have that similarity between our experiences. I know there are. I would dare say most people have that experience. Either quit college because it's like that, or somehow they find a way around it. But it just gets on my nerves. Raelyn?
So mine's a little different. So I did have a little bit of college credits before I went to Trident. I was in the Running Start program at my school, so I was taking classes at the community college near my school. And I think my second year, or transitioning to my senior year, that's when COVID hit. So that's when everything transitioned. So that COVID was really kind of my motivation to, take a step back and figure my things out. So when I started at Trident Tech, I had already kind of gone through the orientation, like the early college orientation classes. So I wasn't really required to do that at Trident. But it was a little difficult starting out because, like I said, with online classes, it was just, I'm more visual, hands-on type of person. So that was just like, I don't know, I'm going to do this. So it definitely, my first year taught me to ask for help and use my resources to the best of my ability, because you really, especially in human services, you got to learn how to get help yourself. So definitely my first year taught me that, to just, take the time to ask for help and get other advice and get other points of view, so I'm not just stuck.
Yeah, that's a beautiful transition into our conversation about human service in general. That once I found myself in human services, and it took me 4 years and 1 degree before I went back. But it was that specific thing you're talking about pissed me off when I was in classes with, my cohorts and my friends. And I particularly remember one day, a friend of mine was really struggling, but not because he didn't understand what we were learning. It's because he had family issues outside of the classroom. And, I told him, I said, we'll call him Corbin. It was his middle name. I said, Corbin, why don't you just go to the professor and explain what's going on? And he looked at me and he said, well, I don't think she'll understand. And again, I was like, well, it's part of her job to understand. Like she will. And, he eventually went. But that really stirred something to me because I realized other people around me were either having issues asking for help or didn't believe that the administration would be there for them. And we were in the human services program where that is so essential. So let's step forward into your personal timelines to when you entered the human services program at the school. Why? Why'd you do it?
I can say that I started in because, like I said, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So at first I was kind of set on studying for nursing, and I was really just not super certain about it. And throughout my whole life, I was really indecisive about what I wanted to pursue in a career. But when I was going through the different programs at Trident, I saw human services, and I was like, okay, this kind of aligns with everything I want to do. Most of the jobs or the careers I wanted to pursue were like teaching, lab technician, things that just involved helping people. So when I looked at human services, I was immediately like, okay, this is something I think that I can kind of venture out and see what fits me the best. So that was kind of my motivation to start. And then as I took the courses, it helped me kind of figure out what I wanted to move into.
Yeah, and I would agree with Raelyn, like how she was like searching for something that fit her best. When I was transferring to Trident, it was a toss up between the nursing as well and the human services. And the human services was more like that. After being in psychology for like so long, like reading the human services stuff, I was like, this is what I was missing. Like, this is what I need. So that's how I just jumped into it.
Right on. So, Raelyn, I'm curious, were there other classes you had taken that kind of directed you towards human services? I know that you kind of came in from high school and you kind of already done some of the I'm assuming like the basic coursework, but were you just kind of searching through the directory and saw like the program description? You're like, yeah, that's the one. Or was there something that like inspired you behind that?
Yeah, so when I was also in the Running Start program, I was planning on studying nursing as well. And with that, you have to take your psychology classes. And one of my psychology classes, I think it was just Psych 101, but I was really connected with the teacher or the professor, and I loved how she was explaining everything and just emphasizing humility and empathy. And I think I really took a lot from that class. And I've always loved learning about how like people work. And even with like my anatomy and physiology class, I love learning about how things work and how we figure out how we can work with, how things work. So with human services, that is definitely, it was definitely something I saw, and I was like, okay, well, I can kind of understand how we as communities work and learn how to apply my knowledge and my passions to help people in those communities.
Right on. I love that. Yeah, it's always refreshing to hear similar responses. I took psychology too, and I accidentally got myself a minor, but I did feel those kind of things in psychology. I was like, oh yeah, like people are interesting. Like I can find some empathy for the way we function because there is so much going on in this meat cave up here, right? Granted, I did not like the clinical feel of the way they taught it at my school. It was very like distant from the human connection that you do see in human services, but I love that. All of us had our feet in the psychology pool, so that kind of pulled us to human services. I'm going to talk about your experience first within your programs. So we discussed earlier, both of you individually, like what it's like to work with other people in your classes. You all have very intimate class settings, don't you?
Yeah, so starting off, they really emphasize group work. So I think even in Human Services 101, they put you in groups and they have you just kind of work with each other, whether it's just on kind of like a paper or just talking with each other. And it's not like over text, it's kind of like the Zoom meetings and you're working with each other. So that really helped me also get out of my shell and really just grasp the material too. So that's kind of what how it functions.
And that you found that to help you, like it. Do you feel connected with those that are in your cohort, even though it's mostly online, right?
Yes, I have group mates that I've been in almost all of my classes with. So you definitely gain these relationships and these friendships with these people. So it was definitely something beneficial for me.
Kiara?
Yeah, it's really the same. Like, even though we're online, I feel more connected to my online classes than I did like just sitting in a class. Cause it's like we email each other about everything, really. Like if we have questions or something that we don't want to bug the teacher about, like we just email each other and things like that. It just keeps us connected in the field, like with each other. So I'll say that.
Tell me if this conclusion is correct. So, from my own personal experience, it was always in person, and then COVID hit, and then so I've only spent time in class or in school online for like the last 3 years, right? So y'all have really what you're experiencing is the opportunity. It's kind of now shifted where you are now making those same in-person connections, but you've adjusted to being in an online environment. Is that right? Y'all have definitely adapted well then because you kind of entered into that from the get-go rather than having the experience of being in person for years and now you're trying to relearn how it means to make human connection with those in your cohort. And y'all basically stayed with the same people so far in your program, correct, from class to class.
Mm-hmm.
That's very helpful too. And I recall that was what was so nice about, I guess, the department size. Like our program size was, there's about 300 of us each, class that came in. So it was very small, and the only difference that we had is if we were going to do nonprofit administration or what I call frontline work, so advocacy and service. What have been, if any, have been the barriers to being online or with the way your program functions? So start with the online part, like the online environment, and then tell me like the pros and cons about the way that you've kind of come to learn and understand human services.
Yeah, so like kind of like what I was saying, I am a visual and hands-on person, so that was a big barrier for me, just not being in that classroom environment around people and kind of bouncing off each other's ideas. You can kind of still do that over Zoom, but it's a little more awkward because you got to turn on your microphone and people are talking to each other, waiting for each other's turns, so it gets a little awkward. But that definitely was a barrier for me. Just being online and also just with the material. Usually you pretty much go through all the textbook material in class in those lectures, but now you're kind of having to do that all by yourself at home. So that was also a barrier for me that I had to kind of work through and figure out.
The cons is like the same. I feel like the having to learn some things on my own is kind of hard. Like having to read the lectures by myself or going through the teacher notes by myself, and it was like, can I really am I fully understanding what's going on? That was like the only con. But I just love how it's like not so. What's the word? It's not so structured, if that makes sense. Like, I love how unstructured it is, and like I can log on whenever I want to do my work. It's not like specific time sometimes. But the only con is just like having to do most of it by yourself. But of course, we have the other classmates, but initially it's like all on your own.
Yeah, that part is, it's challenging, and it's based on person to person, right? The asynchronous setting of online classes is nice unless you're a procrastinator like me. And I say that with all good spirits and heart. I get my stuff done, but I understand that, unless you can really, and this is not a skill we are usually taught, we have to kind of figure out, especially in college, uh, really make the time to get into that flow of study. It can be quite challenging to stay on top of your stuff. But it sounds to me like you have the opportunity right now and going forward that you are enjoying what you're learning, and it does make sense. But just like everyone else, we all share that struggle of like, okay, I got to get into the flow of understanding this and then interpreting the knowledge into real world. And that's something you both mentioned, especially with your internship opportunity, right? Your program has made an effort to not just teach you something from a textbook, but to help you correlate it with real life. Can you talk about that? Keaira, you want to go first?
Yeah, so that's what I love about Trident. Like, they get us, like, it's not just school. Like, they're preparing you to go out there, to go work. They're connecting you with all these people, organizations, possible programs you could do, possible schools you could transfer to continue your education. Like, they're very hands-on, and they make that like very important. Like, it's not going to stop here. Like, you're probably not going to stop here, so here's this tool so you can keep going. Basically, I love that about Trident.
Sure, I completely agree with her. It's definitely, the online part kind of stuns you at first, but as you go through it, you see that they are really, like you said, emphasizing transitioning into like the workforce and transferring to possible 4 years. So I definitely felt that going into it.
I'm curious, are they supportive beyond, let's take a step back. So let's say I'm a student and I'm your friend and I'm in the program with you and I'm thinking, I don't know what I want to do with this degree. Before they provide you with the resources to kind of continue your track in education or into the workforce, do they help kind of guide you into figuring out, okay, what is it exactly you want to do to contribute to this field? Is there a support system in place for that?
Yeah, and it's crazy because some of that is embedded like in our coursework. Like, sometimes like they'll give us some assignments where we're just like basically just talking about ourselves and what we think we need and what we're good at and what we want. Like, it's really good. Like,
I got good thoughts.
Yeah, they make it very personable for us.
Yes, I was going to mention that because that was one of the things that really helped me figure out what I wanted to transition into, because a lot of the coursework was kind of like, what are your skills and what skills do you want to build upon, and what in your life has motivated you to come into this program. So definitely those assignments helped me kind of figure out what I wanted to do.
That warms my heart to hear, right? And I think it has a lot to do whether or not that element is in our programs. Part of it is, the size of the school. As like redundant as that sounds, the smaller the cohort, the smaller of anything, the easier it is for people to kind of be intimate or include an intimate element, which includes understanding and knowing yourself and your skills and how you want to, apply that to your work. I can't recall that being part of my program per se, but it did come later as far as like the hands-on experience, right? But a problem I think a lot of students have, dependent upon, a bunch of variables, is going into human services field or like the program as an undergraduate. And then because the field is so broad, which is a blessing and sometimes a curse, depending on how you look at it, knowing what population they want to serve, what steps they want to take next. There are plenty of people that I graduated with who, like, right after their internship, they were in the door, they were behind a desk, they were ready to go. And then there were a handful of us who were like, cool, we're still not entirely sure. Our interests are vast, they're varied, so it's very relieving to know that y'all are being given the opportunity to explore yourselves, and that you have, a clear vision of what you're going to do with all of the things that you're learning. Because going back to your experience in the beginning, Kiara, about being told what to learn, that is a echoing problem. And so it's really relieving to hear that there are students who are not being put in front of that burden by the school itself, right?
Head over and check out our YouTube channel. You'll find this episode and previous conversations of the Roundtable podcast. Everything those can be found on our website, nationalhumanservices.org.